Thank you, Frank. I guess the mic is on. Awesome. Good morning. It's great to be here today. I thought when Frank started that I was going to have to address all of the questions that came up at the tables, but I'll just stay focused on my talk this morning. So I am here to talk about a subject which I am super passionate about, and it's unfortunately not riding with training wheels on the bike like the picture states, but it is about leadership and about parenting, and what are the lessons that we can learn from parenting, particularly in this day and age, in this time of unbelievable change. In my talk this morning, I'm going to share just a few things. We're not going to go deep into the heavy theory of attachment, but I'm going to describe some basics of attachment theory that I think can help inform and maybe give us some advice about how we want to think about leading in this turbulent times. I'm also going to briefly refer to a gentleman from Case Western Reserve University, Ron Fry, and some notions that he had on building healthy, well-rounded organizations. And I think we all can kind of see the parallels that the similarities between building healthy, resilient, capable children are very similar to building healthy, resilient, capable, transforming organizations. And to pay attention to what's going on and how can we learn from those two unique perspectives. So this is the world we're in today, right? We're changing fast. We're in constant whitewater. Around every corner, there's challenges. So this scene, this can be absolutely exhilarating. So much joy can be had in this scene. And it can also be exhausting. It can build your confidence to new heights, and it can deplete your confidence to the darkest places that you can imagine. I suppose it has everything to do with the kind of raft that you're in, for one, and the kind of guide that you have leading you down that stream. So in this changing environment, I mean, we all know the pace of change today. The average worker, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, changes their job every 4.4 years. 52% of the Fortune 500 firms since 2000 are no longer there. Technology is doubling at a rate never seen before. And if you look at the productivity gains over the last 10 years through value change engineering and TQM and Six Sigma and all of these really wonderful things that we've done, really, when you think about it, the last frontier, the last place for value creation to be had, and the piece that's most important is how great leadership can create a sense in an organization where people can grow personally and the organizational can transform, that they're supported, that they're encouraged, and that this kind of rapid change is simply normalized. It used to be 5-10 years ago, we used to think about having to create a crisis or a sense of urgency to get the change agenda moving. The fact of the matter is today, that's the world we live in. So if you aren't changing, if you aren't growing rapidly, and if you aren't creating conditions when your children and when your organization can get comfortable with that and actually enjoy that and then thrive in that, then you're going to be left behind. So leading in this environment, leading in a way more than ever where people can take risk, they can fail, they can experiment, they can explore, and they can learn to deal in productive ways with failure and in healthy ways with failure is what I would contend is management's and leadership's number one challenge in these times. So the question is, what might attachment theory teach us about dealing with change, this amazing pace of change? And when you think about children, I mean, children, as we all know, they are like learning machines, right? Every hour, every day, almost every minute when they're not sleeping, they're learning something new, they're trying something new. And for those that are fortunate enough to have parents that they're securely attached to, it's a wonderful experience. Attachment theory really refers to the nature of the early relational bonds between a child or an infant and their caregiver. And John Bowlby, one of the early theorists in attachment theory, describes it as the lasting psychological connectedness between individuals. And when we think about the importance of that psychological connection, we can imagine the psychological connections that we all have at work, with our peers, with our leaders, and how important and how fateful that nature of that relationship is, particularly in these times that we're in. So Bowlby goes on to describe that there's really two forms of attachments. And first is secure attachment, in which the self and others are viewed basically positively. And then there's another form of attachment, and there's really two variations of this that is referred to as insecure attachment, where others and self are perceived more negatively. In secure attachment, the parental style is, we've indicated here, is really aligned with the child and in tune with the child's emotional needs. And so from this model, as the child is exploring, they do so with a safety and security, knowing that their parents, their mom or their dad, are going to be there as they encounter really challenging moments. They're willing to reach out with the trust and confidence that that parent will be there for them. And it's from this posture that exploration happens, that new things are learned, that they take on the world full tilt, and that they begin to learn and that they create resilience in themselves as human beings. A less ideal form of attachment and an insecure form of attachment, the first one I'll talk about is what's called ambivalent. And this attachment style is really described as inconsistent, meaning the child in this situation isn't sure if the parent's going to be there or not. Sometimes they're there, and sometimes they're not. So as the child goes about and learns and explores the world, there's a sense of anxiety and separation anxiety that comes in. They're far less willing to reach out because there's not the sense of security that they know someone will be there for them to pick them up and carry them forward. And they spend a lot of their energy trying to get in tune with their parents, with the others, to help them be secure and to make things better and to make their lives better. We've seen this in organizations too, when we have our people out trying to get in tune with our leaders versus actually focusing on the work that needs to get done, right? So the last form of attachment model that I'll share with you is what's called avoidant. And in this parental style, it's really the parental style is one of unavailable or rejecting. In this case, the child actually knows that the parent won't be there because they've reached out to them time and time again, and so they have a built-in knowledge that that person will not be there to support them. Obviously, in this scenario, they don't learn to rely on others, they don't seek out help, and they often become very sectioned off, and the joy of exploring and finding and making sense of the world is certainly lessened. Obviously, and needless to say, it's through these secure attachments that children and people develop optimally. They stretch themselves, they grow out into the world, and they do amazingly wonderful things. They benefit from the sense and the safety and the security that has been created. They benefit from the connections of relationships which allow them to forage out into the world. They benefit from a bolder posture to take on life's challenges full tilt. And most importantly, they benefit from being able to feel and deal with the emotions and stress of life. Through all those little encounters when mom and dad were there, they've learned to have that experience and to make something of it and to know they're going to be okay on the other end of it. A lot of these early relational bonds are carried on throughout life in patterns and other relationships. But there is so much evidence, amazing amounts of evidence, that show that new forms of relating can happen for every one of us, regardless of what our early relational bonds were. So it could be through a new caregiver. It could be through a new relationship that you have. It could be through bosses or managers or organizations that you work in, where all of a sudden you learn that there's a new and different way of relating, where you're safe and secure, where you can stretch out, and where someone is there for you. And that gives us, I think, as leaders, a charge, to realize that the folks that are coming into our organizations and the environments that we want to create to deal with that whitewater world is one where creating that sense of security is so, so important. It's not enabling, it's not pandering to people, it's about creating an environment where they can actually grow and carry forth the agenda of the organization. Ron Fry at Case Western Reserve University describes the foundations of healthy organizations as their ability to generate renewal and transformation through the management of continuity, novelty, and transition. And in Ron's model, Continuity really refers to in an organization, and it's management's dilemma to kind of keep these things all in check. But continuity in an organization, it really refers to the things in an organization that people can count on. It could be the values. It could be just simply the way things get done around here. It could be knowing that on Tuesdays this happens, on Wednesdays this happens, and so on and so forth. But in this sea of change, people want this base that they can go to and count on. Novelty in an organization refers to the need to grow, to innovate, both from an organizational perspective, but the people within the organization are growing and learning. Transition in this model really refers to the internal dialogue. What's the internal script happening in the organization? How are we collectively moving from point A to point B? What is the water cooler talk? And what are the forums that we have to make sure that internal dialogue is happening in a way that can connect with people? And I will tell you that management's dilemma, leadership's dilemma, these things are never perfectly in balance. And parenting is never perfect either. But it's by and large trying to keep these things in check. And when you look at this model, it's very similar to a model of building a healthy and secure attachment with children. So what happens in this model is, you know what happens in your life when there gets to be too much continuity without any growth, and you don't know where you're going, your life gets stagnant and you kind of fall back. Or if you're growing and you're flying out at a speed pace, if you're just down that rapid river, but there's no direction, there's no sense of where you're going, you lose some of that muster. Or if you're transitioning, but there's nothing that you can count on from which you're operating from a foundation, once again, you're not in an optimal situation. So I think this model just shares an interesting perspective, and what it really is, it's about how do we build that continuity, how do we build that security and safety, growth and transformation into our organizations. No different than the parenting example. So we're back to the bike analogy and learning to ride the bike. We've all seen this scene 100 times, either literally or figuratively, in our organizations. We're out there every day teaching kids to ride bikes, right? I would contend that this scene goes down in one of 4 fateful ways. Fateful ways, not because we care necessarily in this situation whether a kid learns to ride the bike, but we care that the kid learns to ride the bike and they learn that they can learn new things down the road. So in scene number 1, you've got mom or dad, it's either Saturday morning or Sunday morning, sometimes it's Wednesday night, I forget when the bike learning tour actually happens. But the dad gets behind the bike and they hold the back of the seat because it always starts the same way, because when you're going to learn something, you got to start from one place. And the dad runs behind the bike, he lets go, and what happens? The kid falls. Because when you learn new things, 9 out of 10 times, maybe 8 out of 10 times, you're going to fall. And in this particular situation, unfortunately, dad looks down at the kid, yells at the kid, tells the kid, I told you to look straight. I told you to pedal. I said push the left thing. I told you to push this pedal and not turn that way. And the kid kind of looks up at the dad and takes in a message about taking on new tasks, taking on challenges, learning the world that they operate in. In scenario 2, it's not much different. It's mom or dad, let's say it's mom, she's got the hand on the seat, she's running behind the bike, she lets go, the kid falls because the kid's always going to fall. Because the kids in our conference room and the adults that we're working with, they're going to fall, right? In this case, instead of yelling at the kid, mom, with fear in her eyes, kneels down, coddles the child till the child begins to cry. It's interesting. All the research shows that the way that you look at a child determines if they're going to cry. And in both of those scenarios I just played out for you, what's really going on there is not the kid learning to deal with their emotions, it's the parents dealing with their own emotions, because the kid really wasn't afraid. But they're learning some interesting messages. So in scenario 3, which is almost more tragic than the first 2, dad gets behind the bike, he runs, he keeps pushing the bike, he runs, he keeps pushing the bike, he runs out of stage, he's pushing the bike so far. And you know what he never does? He never lets go of the bike. And we've seen that 100 times. We've seen it with parents. We've seen it in our organizations. It kills me when I watch that happen. Because here we are, we've been just talking about an environment where there's so much coming at us, and if we're not building kids to be able to ride their bikes, something is not going to work here for us, right? So the moral of the story isn't that there's such a thing as perfect bike riding lessons, perfect parenting, or perfect leadership. No, they can just be good enough, and you'll do just great. But it is about taking on a little bit of a different challenge and letting your kids and your organizations experience what it is to learn and grow. So in this fourth scenario, the scenario which I tend to like a lot, you've got mom riding behind the bike, pushing that seat, yelling encouraging words, telling Joey or Sammy or Sally, you can do it. She lets go, he falls, right? But before Joey can even realize that he fell, mom's picked him back up, put him on the bike, the kid's feet catch up with those pedals that are still turning, and the bike goes like this, because when they learn to ride the bike, it kind of just goes like that. And it goes off into the distance, and what's so amazing is the feeling that Joey has in that situation is one of pride, one of confidence, one of joy, one of self-mastery, and so much more important than learning to ride the bike. What's more important than that is Joey has learned a lesson. He's learned a lesson that his caregiver or his leader is there for them. Not win or lose, not win or tie, but win or lose. He's learned that taking on new things is a great thing. It's a great idea. It's fun. It's exhilarating. I think when you step back from it, you realize that there's such a fine nuance between good leadership and good parenting. And it's a fine line. And I would say one of the lines is, as it relates to feeling and dealing with the stresses of life, it's the difference between feeling with versus feeling for your children. It's dealing with versus dealing for your children or the people in your organization. It's about being with them in the tough moment and helping them through it and make sense of it, knowing that it's okay on the other end. As leaders, we need to realize that the painful part is never the end. The painful part of any project that you're on and anything you're dealing with, the toughest issue, the painful part is never the end. It's just where all the growth and the goodness or the dysfunction can happen if you jump in too quickly. As leaders, when we take away the pain, the anxiety, the fear, the joy, the happiness, and all the good that goes with these moments that happen 15 times a day, we take away the future resilience of our organizations and the people within them. So as leaders, our role is to help people grow fully into themselves, confident in their abilities to traverse life's challenges, excitements, and even dangers from time to time. So I would just ask that as you go back out into your organizations and you talk to your leaders and you think about how can I have an impact, think back to this metaphor of the bike riding. Think back to the kind of leaders you want teaching people to ride the bikes in your organization. And how can that help sustain you? How can that help grow your people individually? But most importantly, and most vitally, how that can help your organization remain in business in the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you.